And you are tuning into the Dr. Chris Radio Horror Show on 91.3 FM WCAW in Worcester, Massachusetts. If you're not listening to us on WCAW, hopefully on Radio Free America. If not there, then checking us out on the YouTube channel and the slideshow. Tonight on the show, we have Kyle and Bill on the show with us to talk about their award-winning documentary. Thank you guys for coming on the show to talk about this long-awaited, we just can't wait to see it. I think it's coming out October 6th. Survival of the Film Freaks, but
Yeah,
Best Movie Award 2018.
Yeah, that was a blast. Actually, it was kind of unexpected and I don't know, man. It was weird because this is like a very interesting passion project for I think the two of us. So it was like to come out the gate like on our second film festival
money
and
grab.
yeah, well, it's not, yeah. This isn't a money grab for us.
This is my paycheck film.
Yeah, Bill's getting paid the big bucks on this one. I'm just hanging out. But no,
$.
yeah, I'm paying Bill. No, but it was cool because this is the second time screening it to the public. We had our world premiere at Horror Hound Film Festival at the end of August, and this is only the second public screening. And to kind of come out with an award like that was really cool. So it kind of like reinforces the idea that like, hey, we actually are doing something that is kind of legit, that it matters, that people dig on.
How was the reception at Horror Hound?
It was excellent. We were nominated for Best Movie at Horror Hound too, which was a surprise. We didn't even actually know until we went to the awards ceremony, and our name popped up on the screen as a nominee, and we were like, oh, cool. So we were like nominated against like the Joe Dante flick that was there, and their film festival isn't just a film room. Like Rock and Shock, usually has a film room. They don't this year, but it's not like an integral part of the convention. At Horror Hound, their film festival is a full-fledged, legit part of the event for the weekend. It was awesome. We felt very well taken care of. Everybody knew who we were when we showed up. There was no issues with trying to track someone down to get your passes and it was like, if there's anything we can do to help you out, let us know. They had a street team there that handed out flyers for us. So before we even showed the movie, it was a success because we got a nomination out of it and we got a bunch of people that were, helping us out. So it was really great. But the screening itself, it was the first time we'd showed it to anyone other than our families and our friends. And it went over really well. They have a huge room there that probably holds, 100 people. And I'd say that we had, between 50 and 60 people in there for the first screening on a Sunday morning, which is the night after the really, really late night party that they do the Saturday night that goes until like 5 a.m. So it was really nice to have a good group of people in there. Some of the fellow filmmakers that we had met the day before, and it was great. Everyone loved it. We signed a bunch of autographs, gave away a bunch of posters, kissed some babies. It was
beautiful.
Really, really great experience.
For anyone not familiar with it, what are you guys covering in this amazing looking documentary?
So Survival of the Film Freaks is all about we kind of pitch it as half love letter to half exploration of cult cinema, up from the kind of the beginnings of the Grindhouse 70s era all the way up till now, and how technology is changing the definition of cult. So back then when cinema, underground cinema, independent cinema, low budget films were gaining some attention and notoriety and finding an audience, that was all word of mouth, and that was all just walking into a Grindhouse theater or a 42nd Street theater, or if you weren't in New York, if you were just driving into a drive-in and seeing the B picture, it was all word of mouth and all kind of stumbling upon things. So how does cult cinema exist in a time where we can find anything we want? All the information is out there online at the click of a mouse or a trackpad or whatever. How does cult cinema still thrive, survive, and cultivate an audience in an age where we know everything or almost everything, So that's kind of what the film really delves into. There's a nice little history of, we touch on the theaters, we touch on VHS, we touch on cable TV, actually a lot more than we expected to when we went into the movie. We talk about cable TV quite a bit. We talk about format changes from VHS to DVD to Blu-ray to digital files, and then we explore sort of all the ways that people are finding out about cinema nowadays, whether it be online through social media or whether it be all these boutique companies putting out, Blu-rays of films that nobody's seen since the theater run. it kind of touches on a lot of topics, but it really is a love letter to cult cinema and finding out the ways that we can still celebrate it in this day and age.
Yeah, we really one of the things that I've said this a couple times that we've showed during our intro for it is that we really wanted to make a documentary that was going to entertain and educate, because if you kind of look at the idea for it and, you start throwing around all the technical stuff of like, downloading this and that and this, it sounds like it can be more of like an educational piece. And it is an educational piece, but we wanted to make sure that it was entertaining in the same time. So we really focused on making sure that we got really interesting interviews. We used a lot of fun, interesting clips. Like almost all the clips in the film are from classic trailers. So we didn't use a lot of like scenes from films. We took specific fun stuff from trailers because, let's be honest, a lot of those movies from the 70s, their trailers are the best thing about them.
What are some of the films that you guys cover in it that we'd be familiar with? And then give us some that are really, really unknowns. Or not unknowns, but, only people like me, you, Kyle might know about.
I mean, we don't really delve into specific titles too much. We purposely steered clear of kind of like the low-hanging fruit. Like, we don't really talk. I don't think there's a quick clip from Rocky Horror, but we don't really get into talking about Rocky Horror all that much. There's obviously mentions of stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Last House on the Left, the Dolomite flicks. We look at genres and we give you like a whole bunch. Like when we mentioned blaxploitation, like you'll get like 7 or 8 clips of different blaxploitation trailers. And then when we're talking about 80s horror, you get a whole bunch of like stuff like Prom Night and like stuff that just kind of comes through. But we purposely didn't want to get like too much into like speaking on specific titles, because then it becomes more about those movies and not the movement. So we really kept it open to like, people bringing up things and talking about them for 30 seconds. Then we move on to the next thing. But there's a number of titles like, like Eraserhead comes up a bunch of times. The most obscure one I think that we feature is one that I've just championed for many years because we covered it on my podcast a number of years ago. But we have the teaser for the film Alabama's Ghost in there, which is a film that will never, I think, come out on Blu-ray because it's got rights issues and the director just recently passed away and there's all these things. And I remember when we were filming, I pitched it to Scream Factory. I was like, hey, you guys should put this out on Blu-ray. And they looked into it a little bit, but like there was no rights there. But that's probably the most bizarre one that I think that probably comes up. But there's all kinds of clips of like tons of things. And like that's one of the parts that I think people seem to be enjoying the most, and some of the feedback that we've gotten, and I think Hal will probably agree with me, is that people, as they're watching it, they're like, oh man, I remember this, and like, oh, I remember seeing that video cover when I used to go rent videos, or like, oh, I saw that at Up All Night, at 2:00 in the morning. And almost universally, that's been some of the feedback we get in almost immediate response from people watching the film. It's like, oh, it's so much fun. It's like revisiting my, my high school years, or like, when I was like, in college or whatever.
And on the flip side of that, there's also clips of movies that people have never seen, and they're like the trailer clips that show some crazy monster or some crazy explosion. It's like they are like, oh man, what is that film? So it actually, I think it does a service to our film to not dive into specific films, but to talk about movements and subgenres and different time periods on the whole, and include certain clips from there and really be like, oh, this is what it looks like. And then people can pick and choose what they want to dive into. The best bit of feedback that we continue to get is that people, after seeing the documentary, want to go out and either rewatch the cult classics that they know and love, or find new ones that we did mention or we did show a trailer to, or just want to dive back in anyway to a certain subgenre, or just it gets them excited to watch these movies again. And that is, honestly, that's the best feedback that we can get, is that we excited somebody so much to want to go watch some of these flicks.
I'm always on the lookout for whatever film I can go back into my mind to try and remember that was like a cult favorite or something. I had no idea what the hell it was other than the artwork for the VHS box art, like Demon Wind. Of course, then eventually I watched Demon Wind and I was like, oh good God, this is impossible to sit through.
It's bad. And Vinegar Syndrome put out like this spectacular Blu-ray collector's edition of Demon Wind too. So it's like, you think about the money that they put into making that movie look pristine, and you're like, it's just so bad.
Hey, I love that flick. I watched it and I'm like, man, this was exactly what I wanted it to be. It's not great. It's not good, but I liked it a lot.
Hold on one quick second, guys. I got to take care of one thing. Someone popped their head into the studio.
Yes, sir.
I almost swore and I corrected myself.
Yep. I know. I almost did myself.
This Demon Wind is awful.
Awful.
I don't know why you like that movie.
I don't like it, but it is one that I want to watch with a group of people. I think because the first 30 minutes introduces 10 characters, I think I would like to just watch that. Like, it's in that respect, it is the most 80s thing ever. In the fact that they're just like,
It really is.
they have a journey that they have to do, and they introduce 8 characters or 10 characters all in like a span of probably it's less than 30. It's probably 20 minutes, man.
Kyle was waxing nostalgic about his love of Demon Wind.
I was. Sorry.
We're kind of gonna get that again coming up with a much more well-known film series getting the Blu-ray treatment from Screen Factory. In fact, Mick Harris, no Mick. Yeah, Garris said that he just got done recording the commentary for like Critters 2, and I was like, wow, Critters 2 is going to get a commentary? That's crazy. So the Critter movies are finally coming on Blu-ray, and that has probably also partially to do with the fact that there's a Critters television series coming out soon.
Yeah, I saw
that.
Could you imagine what that's going to be? Wild.
Yeah, and I hope they're real too.
A good wild or a bad wild, but it's going to be wild nonetheless.
I mean, it's funny. We got Critters coming out the same time we have the Purge television series starting.
Yeah, that started this week.
Episode that it was good.
Was it good?
Yeah, it was good. I actually think I like the Purge much more in like 43-minute increments.
Wow. Yeah, I forgot that started last week. I got to try to track that down.
Is it on FX?
It's on
No,
USA.
it's on USA.
Oh, it's on USA?
Every Tuesday night following SmackDown Live.
Oh, it's right after SmackDown, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet.
I had a bunch of hats sent to me. Okay. That making this a political thing. You know the hat that Donald Trump wears?
Yes.
Okay, so they're basically exactly like that, but they say the first Purge.
That's awesome.
And they're supposed to be a parody of the hat he wears, because if you've seen the first Purge, the one that came out this past summer, we're still in summer.
I haven't seen it yet. Was it any good?
It was okay. I mean, I like the second and third one a lot more, mainly because I love that actor that was in it, Frank Grillo.
I like Frank Grillo, yeah.
Oh my God, he was amazing, especially the third one. I mean, that guy is like, I want to see him in a movie with John Wick, or Keanu Reeves, John Wick, and the two of them just go at it. Anyway, not to get too far off, but yeah, so we got sent a bunch of those hats, and I posted one of them with a picture of Donald Trump saying that we're going to give these away at a convention coming up. And the convention went nuts because they were like, you don't understand being a white guy. This is all going to be edited out, by the way. Being a white guy, how much of a trigger this is for minorities and blacks and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, wow, really? You clearly didn't see the fucking movie that this is tied to. And I had like at least 3 or 4 people who run panels at this convention. The convention will remain nameless, saying to me, do you still have those hats? Because I run this panel, and I'm going to wear that hat at the panel.
I'd wear that hat at the panel.
And I was like, you can most certainly get a hat. And I already been threatened by one of the admin of the convention that if you pass those hats out, there will be repercussions. And I'm like, okay, so you're going to limit my freedom of speech of passing out a baseball cap that's a parody of a guy you clearly don't like.
That's a promotional item for a film.
Yeah.
Take it up with Blumhouse. That's their problem.
Yeah.
No,
I'm
real.
like, do you really want to pull this thread? Go ahead. I will let you know that you're not going to like the convention's not going to like the repercussions, and it's not like a convention I know you guys don't go to. So I'm like, okay, you pull that thread and see what happens come January. He says this is all going to get edited out. Do you guys cover any because I'm really big into scores, playing those here on Radio of Horror. In fact, we're playing tonight, the day that we're recording this, which is 9/9/2018. And can you imagine next year is going to be 9/9/2019? We're playing Friday the 13th, the final chapter by Harry Manfredi on vinyl from Waxworks. Do you guys cover any scores or music in the documentary?
That is actually one thing that we didn't touch on, because I think And not that we didn't want to. I think that oftentimes there was conversations that we had with some of our interviewees that had talked about scores and things that we remember. But I think the resurgence of scores is happening at a time that's not as nostalgic as the movies are. So we're a lot of places like Waxwork and some of the other companies that are putting out the discs on vinyl. La La Land Records has done a lot of CDs and re-releases of scores.
I like the stuff a lot.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's like I think, and they're doing amazing work. However, I think there's the nostalgia is in knowing the film, not in having had that item prior. So it's like a lot of people didn't have the Tourist Trap album when that movie came out, but people really like the reissue and the repackaging that another company has done and is putting out now. So I think that what we reference in our documentary talks a lot about the film itself. And even though we've talked to interviewees about the other components that companies are focusing on, particularly maybe artwork or soundtracks or old promotional items, it didn't quite match what we were referencing in the documentary. So though we've had those conversations, we don't talk a ton about it in the documentary now.
But our film does have its own score, and
Yes.
I wrote it, so points for me.
Yes, and a lot of the score that we had done by Bill and Jason Moss and friend OK Doc, it does kind of wink and nod to some of those themes that were prominent in those older scores, particularly 80s scores, because it's just who doesn't love a good synth, you know?
Yeah, most of the soundtrack that we did and the scoring elements, at least because there's a number of musical segments that have like actual songs that are a couple that are licensed songs, but I worked pretty much primarily in that mindset of like incidental weird synth just kind of layered into the background, which is now become even more pertinent in so many things since we started the movie. Now it's like everyone's doing it, so we were like cutting edge when we first started, and I was like, oh, we're too slow with what we do, and now it's everywhere.
And I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves, but I think that somewhere down the road, and not down the road like very far down the road, but as we push a release of our film, we'll probably compile some of the music that was made and make that available to people who seek out our doc.
Yeah, we definitely hope to have do a vinyl of the soundtrack at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Scrolling down your Facebook page, there was one poster, I think it's in German, that caught my eye. Alone in the dark, and the image of the girl on the bed. She's got it's a white bed cover sheet. She's wearing white negligee and white panties, and the phallic shaped knife that's coming up through the bed towards her.
Yeah, a lot of those posters were not very subtle.
No, and I'm describing it for anyone who's blind that might be listening to this, because I found out I have blind listeners. I thought that was kind of cool.
I was like blind watchers.
Yeah, better than blind watchers for sure.
Well, I do a audiobook that's a romantic comedy, and I had a few people who emailed me. The email was a little broken up, and they apologized at the end of it because they were blind and they were using the voice software to send the email. And they said, oh, and then I also a big horror fan, and I caught one to your show too. And I was like, so now I'm listening to that whenever I can listen to it. I was like, oh, that's cool.
That's very cool, actually. The fact that they wanted to reach out like that's excellent. And I can imagine that. I mean, I get frustrated as a visual person with talk to text. So I can imagine trying to write an entire email. By the end, you're just like, screw it, man. Like, whatever it sounds like, it sounds like. I'm done doing this.
Yeah, so I'm very popular with horror fans and lesbian horror fans. The romantic comedy is
I'm a big fan of lesbian horror fans, so everyone wins.
Because the romantic comedy is a lesbian romantic comedy, so...
Hey,
that actually sounds amazing.
Well done.
I'll talk more about it later on. But what were you saying about the poster?
Oh, I mean, it's just those posters are not subtle by any means. It's even with companies now and poster art now, you have to be really And PC is not the right word, but you have to be tasteful. I think tasteful is more of what I'm looking for, because I think definitely is poster art that is not PC and still is attention grabbing.
No.
But it's I think it's still like tastefully done. Man, there was no shame in that Alone in the Dark poster, and in various other posters that we have referenced or posted. We do have our end credits does go through a good amount of VHS covers, and we do have a segment that talked about box art within our documentary. So we do touch on some of those covers that are very blatant in their representation of what the film is or what they think the film is. Because there's also the very misleading box art.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah, there is so much misleading box art. Like Demon Wind, if we're going to run it back. Demon Wind has an amazing cover, and that demon that is in the wind is not real. Like, it's not very much. It's not really in the flick. It's very removed from what the cover of that is.
That's putting it lightly.
I mean, you could also completely like do an MST3K of this poster, be like, why would this woman just sit there and let this knife like come towards her?
My favorite stuff though is the stuff from the 80s that the person like on the cover, if it's not a painted cover, if it's like a photo, the person that's on the cover isn't in the movie.
Oh, they're the best.
My favorite is being Sleepaway Camp 2 on Happy Campers, where the girl has the backpack with like the Freddy glove and the Jason mask hanging out of it, and she's like walking all like seductively through the woods with like the one leg held up high, and like that girl's not in the movie.
Right? Or even like something as mainstream as like the Halloween movies. I think the 4th or 5th one had a line saying, "And this time they're ready," and I'm like, no, they're not. They're not ready for Michael Myers in any of these movies until you get to the one coming out next month where Jamie Lee Curtis is preparing for Michael Myers to come back 40 years later, and she's not his brother anymore, or his sister.
Right.
Yeah, but at least Jamie Lee Curtis is actually in the movie.
Yeah, unlike some other movies that put like the big star at the top, and they're in it for like 5 minutes. They're like the bumper
But still,
actor.
they're in the movie. Sleepaway Camp 2, that girl's not even in the film.
The chick on the front cover, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been so long since I've seen it. But yeah, who does play that character in that movie?
She's just random slutty camper 4.
Oh.
I play that character in that movie.
Yeah, not very well, because it was a very unmemorable performance. Although your box
Oh,
art...
Bill.
Your
come
box
on.
art is excellent.
Well, gentlemen, do either one of you play the man holding the remote control and the VHS tape on the cover of your poster?
No,
No,
apparently
but-
this guy named Vincent.
Yes. Yeah, we
Yeah,
did find out. We did find out that was an actual person, which we did not know. We have to reference Joel Robinson on that one. We do remember his first name. I do not remember his last name, but he does exist.
Oh, that's Joe's. I recognize the artwork as Joel Robinson, but I didn't know that if he used a real person or not.
He did.
Yeah,
He
he has-
modeled a real person.
What was the big challenge in putting this documentary together that you guys weren't able to get into the documentary?
Oh God, that's I'd say the biggest challenge was not just there was so much good stuff from guys like Joe Bob Briggs gave us so much good stuff.
Boy,
And,
that guy made a comeback.
It's just like we could have put his entire interview into the movie, but we were all, we can only put so much. So I think having to cut some of the really just like great anecdotal stuff that didn't really fit with the narrative we were building with the movie. So much good stuff from guys like Graydon Clark and William Sachs, who were guys that were making great, horror and cult films in the 70s. So a lot of the stuff that they would come up with was like round and about, like great for the film, but their personal stories, unfortunately, we couldn't really do a whole lot with those because they didn't fit the narrative that we were working with. But they were these amazing stories of like William Sachs tells this story about how he used to he was working for a company and they would just buy like a block of films from Italy, and he'd get all these films from Italy that would be like, Polizia films or, spaghetti westerns. And they would just basically be like, here, edit this stuff into something we can use.
Right.
So it's like stories like where he'd be like, yeah, I'd be sitting there and all of a sudden like Massacre Time would come across my like desk and I'd be like, this is a great movie. What am I, you want me to cut it up? Like, So stories like that, I think that was the biggest thing for me. What about you, Kyle?
Yeah, no, I was absolutely going to say the same thing. It's like it's all in. I don't mean one-liners literally in like a weird punchline joke one-liner. I mean segments of interviews that didn't have anything to match or enough matching things to make a portion of the film. You know, it is stories like that. It's stories like Graydon Clark talking about doing the Forbidden Dance while or having the Forbidden Dance come out the same time that his flick's coming out. I'm spacing on the name of the other one. But there was,
and then there was Lambada, the Forbidden Dance.
yes, there was the two Lambada films that were coming out at exactly the same time, and Graydon Clark trying to like produce his faster than another company was producing theirs, and you know, it's all personal anecdotes are really wonderful, but they didn't tell the story that we were trying to tell. But man, how amazing is it to like have those stories, you know, involved in our interview process? So that was the biggest thing, and I think what could have been a detriment if it wasn't Bill and I going into this knowing that like we just have to sort of let the story form would be trying to like pigeonhole ourselves. I think that like a lot of documentaries have a habit of pigeonholing themselves into like, this is our topic, this is what we need to stay into. And I think that, not to toot our own horns, but I think that like we knew that we needed to let our film sort of breathe and just kind of go where it needs to go. So yeah, we like had these personal anecdotes, or we didn't talk nearly enough about Laserdisc as I wanted to. Didn't have that much about Laserdisc, but we did include a little bit in our documentary. But
Never
just
brought up Betamax, for crying out loud.
we didn't never brought up Betamax. So I think, okay, you know what? Scratch everything I said the 3 minutes previous. The fact that we didn't talk about Betamax is a little bit of a bummer.
Do you guys talk about where films go to die and never seen again? Kind of like, for example, Fright Night Part 2. Never going to get released on DVD or Blu-ray, at least in the United States of America.
I mean, yeah, that stuff definitely comes up. But the film really, it's not even about going to die. The whole idea behind the film is it's survival, and it's how we go into the details without giving too much away, is going into the details of how these films will continue to survive, even if there's a situation like Fright Night 2 with its rights where it's never going to be able to get itself released. And I think someday it might get worked out, but it doesn't. I don't think it's gonna be anytime soon, and it'll probably be like some bare bones release or something. But like that's one that there's so many bootlegs out there of now that it's like, is it even worth trying to actually put out a legitimate version of it?
Yeah,
because people got so sick of waiting. It's traded on the internet completely openly. I mean, you can literally go online, do a Google search for a copy of it, and have it on your computer. And
I actually do think at one point it was streaming at like a very accessible site, like Amazon Prime or something.
It was on Amazon Prime this year, and if you have a region-free player, or an international player, Germany put out a Blu-ray of it.
Right.
Because international rights are completely different than American rights.
See, this is what we end up referencing a little bit in the film, is like we have access to so much that it's like these films do survive in a way. It's like the people who want to put the effort in and like really want to reach out and try to figure out that about these movies or learn more, or at least just maybe even just view them once to say that they watched them. You know, maybe they don't even want to know more than just knowing that the film existed and they got to see it. You know, it's like there are so many ways to access these movies that like cult film can't die. It won't die. Like there will still be films that come out that will become cult. There are movies that existed before that will remain cult, or in the future become cult properties or cult films because they resurface or what have you. It's like there are so many ways to access the movies that we want to see now that there's no way that cult cinema doesn't survive.
Yeah, and we specifically get into the argument of when something goes out of print, you know, whether it's Fright Night or whatever the title is.
Alligator.
With Alligator. That's another good one.
Yes.
I mean, the movie sucks, but like that's a good example of it, though.
God, I couldn't even believe the bear. What was it called? The Grizzly Bear. Finally came on Blu-ray. Wow.
Yeah, the sequel came out too. The second Grizzly film came out too. But like one of the big, you know, a big section of the film is we talk about like, you know, is it fair, or not saying it's fair, you know, like, is it okay to download an illegal copy of Fright Night 2 because it's not available anywhere else. Like, should you not be allowed to watch Fright Night 2 anymore because you don't own a copy of it from a legitimate means?
If you ask Adam Green, he will tell you no.
You would be surprised the information that we get from Adam Green in our film.
He's been very vocal on his podcast about illegal downloads, and I even went up to him and talked to him about it at a convention, saying, "Hey, what is your opinion on Fright Night Part 2?" And he said that I would email or mail, right to the studio, but I was like, but what studio?
Right. No, I think
funny too, because the survival of the film freaks. This film, the idea came about from a conversation I had with Adam Green about 5 or 6 years ago now at this time at Rock and Shock. And we were just talking about stuff, and he was in a bad mood, and I was like, yo, what's your deal? And he's like, oh, Frozen hit the torrent sites this morning. So it was like that timing of like the DVD was coming out in like 3 weeks or whatever, and a copy had made it onto the internet, and he's, it's been downloaded, 100,000 times or whatever this morning. And he was all pissed off. And we just got into this conversation about like, well, what if, somebody sees that movie that by those means and then buys a copy of it and supports the rest of your stuff, but they had never heard of you before. So the idea for the film came from a conversation with him. He's another one that we did a great interview with that we were only able to use limited stuff, but we got a lot of, back and forth opinions on things. One person thinks this, one person thinks that, but there's so many gray areas in the world that we live in now with digital distribution and digital means that, who really owns a film anymore? It's like some people don't even care about rights. It's all these weird things, and it's like we're trying to like kind of sort through it while also still being like, listen, there's a way you gotta be able to support this stuff to be able to make sure that, a guy like Adam Green can make another movie.
Right.
So,
it is almost case by case basis. Like it is, it's very interesting. It's like, you need to support the filmmakers that are out there making things now or are trying to make things now who have had previous films. William Sachs, another great one. He made a film called Spooky House within the 2000s, and he's a filmmaker who made films in the 70s and is still trying to make films now. It's like, you can't try to illegally get one of his flicks and know that you're not damaging his prospects of making another film. I think it's like knowing where, and that's the other thing is like you have to. Ted Raimi has a great quote within our documentary, within Survival of the Film Freaks. He says that like in order to know cult cinema, you need to know history. It takes effort to study cult cinema. So it's like it's knowing the effort and knowing where your eyes as the audience, as the viewer, where your money as the viewer goes and where it helps or hurts people trying to make films now or trying to release films now or trying to like keep these things alive.
You make a great point with that case by case basis too, because it's so easy to say like, if you download films, F you're the problem, but it's not that simple anymore because it's like, I think a big difference depends on what the situation with each specific film is. If something doesn't have a release and you want to see it, should you not be allowed to watch it? Like, there's just so many gray areas.
There are.
Oh, quick note. Of course, you just mentioned Ted Raimi, and at the time of recording this, and then it's going to air beforehand, Ted Raimi's coming to Rock and Shock.
Yes, he is.
Which is which is where I found out about Survival of the Film Freaks, and it's where I met you, Bill. And Kyle, I didn't meet you at Rock and Shock. You came on my show before I actually met you in person at Rock and Shock.
Yes, we met afterwards. We met at Rock and Shock.
Yes, you came on the show years ago, and then last year you came on I met you at Rock and Shock, but Bill, I met you at Rock and Shock about 5-6 years ago. Well, guys, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm really looking forward to checking out the documentary either at the film festival or whenever you guys have a chance to finally release it on disc, which I hope is a thing that happens. I don't mean disc, I mean laser disc.
Are we going to be the guys that are going to bring back the laser disc?
I think this is our time. Our time is now.
It's on.
Are you guys going to have a VHS release for it, or is that too expensive?
We have no idea. Since the festival really kind of just started, we're just kind of want to get it on as many screens as we can for people to see, and then hopefully we'll be able to look at a a physical release later. We expect it to probably go digital some point towards maybe
digital
next year. That's dude, Chris, I agree with you, man. But like that's the way it is now.
No, I know you got to release on digital because there are people
Most
who are not
places
going to be able to get a
won't even
disc.
be able to get a good physical release of something until it's performed well digitally.
And especially something like us, where I mean, we're doing it really independently. Like this is 4 people. So this is Bill, I, and 2 of our producers. This is how this has happened, you know. So it's like we're really hustling to get it out there. So you know, if anybody is in the area and wants to check out Sean O'Shea, excellent. We'll try to keep everybody posted on our Facebook page, Survival of the Film Freaks, and then of course on our Twitter and Instagram at Film Freaks Movie. Like that's the best way to keep in touch with any of the film festivals or screenings that we got going on. We hopefully have a few more in the works, and we'd love for people to come out and check it out.
Absolutely, go out to the The best bet is to follow them on Facebook and other social media so you can get an update of exactly where they're going to be and times and other stuff that's happening with the documentary, including a home video release sometime in the far-flung future. All right, guys. Well, every time I hear someone do that, again, this goes back to Fright Night Part 2. Reminds me of the janitor when the nurse finds out that Charlie's girlfriend isn't who she says she is. And she's like, The janitor's like, That's a really obscure reference for you to a stupid little thing in a movie.
I love it. I love it.
All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Chris, thank you very much, man.
Thanks for having us.